I never imagined my first job as a nurse would be like this. Fresh out of nursing school, I thought working night shifts would give me the experience I needed, something to prove myself. It wasn't what I wanted exactly, but the hospital was desperate for staff, and I was desperate for a start. The hospital wasn't in the heart of Tokyo, where I had dreamed of working, but farther after, out on the city's fringes, nestled near the mountains where the urban sprawl met the wilderness. The isolation didn't bother me. In fact, I thought it would be a good way to learn without the pressure of being in a big crowded facility. Quiet, uncomplicated, the mental hospital was old, towering over the surrounding area like some relic of another time, the kind of building that looked like it belonged in a ghost story, long hallways, walls yellowed with age, and the perpetual smell of antiseptic and damp concrete. Its exterior walls were cracked in places, the paint peeling off, and inside the sterile fluorescent lights flickered just enough to make you wonder if the electricity was reliable. My first night at the hospital had started normally enough, though. At PM, as the day staff was seeking up, I found myself alone in the nurses' station organizing my materials for the night. There wasn't much to do yet, except to get used to the quiet and the way the hospital seemed to shift when the sun went down. Yuki, one of the nurses who had only been working here for a couple of weeks, strolled in clearly relieved to be heading home. She had the look of someone who was still figuring things out, herself. Weeks isn't enough time to settle into a place like this. "I thought you're the new one, right?" she asked, giving me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I nodded. "Yeah, first night." She stopped mid-step, raising an eyebrow. "Did they give you the rules?" I asked. Confused, Yuki's expression shifted slightly. "They didn't give you a set of rules for the night shift." I shook my head. No one mentioned anything about rules. That's weird," Yuki said, frowning as though something wasn't sitting right with her. "When I started, they gave me these weird rules. I've only been here weeks, so I'm still getting used to them myself." She walked over to the desk and pulled out a blank piece of paper, grabbing a pen. "Let me write them down for you. You'll want to follow these." I watched as she wrote quickly. Her brow furrowed slightly. She seemed distracted. Maybe even a little uneasy, her inexperience showed, but she handed me the paper with a serious look. "Follow these exactly, and you should be fine." I took the paper from her and looked at the list of handwritten rules. Rule at AM, make sure the windows in the west wing are closed. If one is open, close it and leave immediately. Rule 2, if you see a patient walking in the hallway after midnight, do not speak to them. They are not patients anymore. Rule 3, if the lights in the east wing go out, leave the wing and do not return until sunrise. Rule, if the elevator doors open by themselves, do not get inside. Wait for them to close. Rule 5, if you see a shadow that doesn't belong to you, leave the room immediately. Rule 6, if escape is your only option, be prepared to sacrifice a part of yourself. I stared at the paper, not sure what to make of it. It looked like something out of a ghost story. I glanced up at Yuki, expecting her to laugh, but she didn't. "Is this some kind of initiation thing?" I asked, hoping that maybe this was just some odd tradition for new staff. "No," Yuki said, shaking her head, her voice quieter. "Now, it sounds ridiculous, I know. But trust me, you'll want to follow them. I've heard things." I frowned, studying her face for any sign of humor, but there was none. She wasn't joking. This was something real for her. "Are you sure this is all of them?" I asked. Yuki hesitated, biting her lip as though trying to remember something else. I think that's everything. I'm still getting used to it myself." She forced a smile. "It should be fine if you follow these before I could ask anything else." Yuki grabbed her things and left the station, leaving me standing there in silence. I looked at the clock. PM, the night was just beginning. I folded the paper carefully, slipping it into the pocket of my scrubs, a joke I thought it has to be. But something about the way Yuki had looked at me, the serious expression on her face, it was unsettling. The hospital was unnervingly quiet at night. The hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional distant creak of old pipes were the only sounds that broke the silence. I found myself wandering the halls just to keep myself busy, the sense of isolation heavy in the empty corridors. By AM, I made my way toward the west wing, the folded piece of paper still in my pocket. There wasn't any particular reason I went there. Maybe I was testing the ridiculous rules to see if they were just part of some strange tradition for newcomers, or maybe it was the pull of curiosity. What if Yuki was right? The West Wing was empty as I expected. Its long, dimly lit hallways seemed to stretch on forever, the shadows from the rooms creeping out toward the center of the hall. I glanced into each room as I passed, but they were all empty, just empty white beds and old medical equipment unused and forgotten. I checked my watch. A.M., my fingers grazed the folded paper in my pocket, and I sighed. Might as well get it over with. I began checking the windows in the hallway first. One was closed, the second one closed, third one as well. I kept moving, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the still air. The cold from outside seemed to seep in through the walls, making the air heavy and uncomfortable. As I approached the final window, my breath caught in my throat. It was open just slightly, but enough for the cold night air to drift in, brushing against my skin. With a chill that felt too deliberate, too personal, I stood there for a moment, frozen by the absurdity of it all, but I shook it off, telling myself that old buildings had quirks like this. Windows didn't always close properly. Still, I felt a strange reluctance to touch it, to shut it. It was as though something wanted it open, needed it open. I closed the window, and the latch clicked with a sound that felt final, like closing a door to something unseen. The silence that followed was louder than the click itself. Relieved, I quickly left the West Wing, trying to shake off the feeling that something had changed. It's just an old hospital. Nothing more by A.M., the hospital had settled into an eerie kind of stillness. I returned to the nurse's station, trying to distract myself by checking the security monitors. Most of the patients were asleep. Their rooms quiet except for a room. The man inside had been pacing back and forth for a while. I didn't think much of it at first. Nighttime restlessness wasn't unusual here, especially among the patients. But as I watched the monitor, my eye caught something else, something moving in one of the hallways. A man in a hospital gown was standing in the middle of the second-floor corridor. His back was turned to the camera, his body still facing away from me. At first it seemed like he was just standing there lost or confused. His head was slightly tilted to one side, almost like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. A cold sensation crawled up my spine. I grabbed my flashlight out of reflex, but my hands shook as I moved toward the hallway where I'd seen him. My footsteps were slow, hesitant, the beam of light bouncing nervously off the walls as I reached the core corridor. When I turned the corner, he was still there. Standing in the center of the hallway, his back was to me, his hospital gown hanging loosely off his frail frame. His posture was wrong, his body stiff, like a mannequin. He wasn't moving. I couldn't even see the rise and breathing. I took a cautious step forward, then stopped. As I heard it, his breathing, it wasn't normal. It was ragged, deep, and inhuman. Each breath came in uneven bursts, almost like gasping, but slower, the kind of breath you'd expect from someone trying to force air into lungs that didn't work anymore. A wet, dragging sound followed each inhale, like something inside him was broken. He still didn't move. His head stayed tilted his back. Rigid, he was waiting. I wanted to call out to ask if he needed help. My instinct was to move closer. But then the rule flashed in my mind. If you see a patient walking in the hallway after midnight, do not speak to them. They are not patients anymore. I felt a rush of dread, as though a cold hand had wrapped itself around my heart. His breathing grew louder, more ragged. I could hear the wet, gurgling sound of his lungs struggling to function. But he didn't turn around. He didn't move. I took a step back. Then, another. My chest tightened with fear, my breath catching in my throat as I slowly backed away from the hallway. I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. My mind screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to move slowly, carefully, as I turned the corner. There was no denying the cold, creeping terror that told me I'd narrowly avoided something terrible by A.M. The sense of unease had settled into my bones, and I couldn't shake it. Every creak of the building, every flicker of the lights felt deliberate now, like the hospital was trying to send me a message, something just out of reach. I wandered the hallways again, trying to keep myself occupied. But the longer I stayed, the more the air felt thick, oppressive around. I heard something, a faint tapping noise, rhythmic and unnatural. It was coming from room. I hesitated, the rules flashing in my mind. I didn't remember seeing anyone in room earlier. It must be a mistake. Maybe a patient had been moved during shift change, and I hadn't noticed the door to room was slightly open, and I felt an unnatural pull toward it. The tapping continued as I approached, like fingers lightly drumming against a wooden surface. I pushed the door open immediately. The air shifted. It was colder in here, so cold that I could see my breath fogging in front of me. The lights in the room flickered violently, and an overwhelming sense of wrongness settled over me. The tapping had stopped. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my ears. That's when I saw her. A figure stood in the far corner of the room, her face obscured by long, tangled black hair. She was unnaturally still, her head slightly cocked to one side, her lips split wide into a grotesque grin. Were too red. Too wide her eyes. Those hollow dark eyes stared right through me. She took a step forward, her body moving with a fluid, unnatural grace. Too fast. I ran out of the room before I could process what I had just seen. My mind was racing, heart hammering against my chest as I sprinted down the hallway, desperate to get back to the nurse's station. What the hell was that? Am I losing my mind? I reached the end of the hallway, my breath ragged, but my momentum was suddenly stopped by a soft ding. The elevator doors in front of me slid open. Rule: if the elevator doors open by themselves, do not get inside. Wait for them to close. My legs trembled, threatening to give out beneath me as I stood frozen in place, staring into the empty elevator. I watched it, barely daring to breathe. My eyes stayed locked on the empty space within the elevator. I could almost feel something in there, lurking just out of sight, waiting for me to step inside. For a few moments, the elevator remained open, its doors wide and inviting. Then slowly they slid shut with a final mechanical click. I let out a shaky breath. My nerves frayed beyond belief. I was losing the grip on reality. Everything felt wrong, so deeply, impossibly wrong. I rushed back to the nurse's station, trying to collect myself. But the panic was tightening around me like a vice. My mind was racing, trying to piece together what was happening. As I approached the station, I glanced down the corridor leading to the east wing. That's when the lights went out. The entire hallway was plunged into darkness, so complete that it seemed to swallow the air around it. Rule 3: if the lights in the east wing go out, leave the wing and do not return until sunrise. My feet felt like they were made of lead. I stood frozen in place, unable to tear my eyes away from the pitch-black void that had once been a hallway. The shadows crept toward me, moving like liquid alive with an unseen force. I felt it then. Something watching me from within the darkness. Its presence was undeniable, pressing against my chest like a weight I couldn't escape. Slowly I backed away, my breath quickening as I distanced myself from the blackened wing. I couldn't see what was in there, but I knew I didn't want to find out. Not now. Not ever. I arrived at the nurse's. My hands shaking uncontrollably as I rifled through the papers on the desk. My vision was blurred, panic clawing at the edges of my mind. The hospital was alive with something I couldn't understand as I shuffled through the mess of paperwork. My hands found an old crumpled sheet of paper buried beneath patient records. I unfolded it, slowly, dread creeping up my spine. With every word I read, the list was identical to the one Yuki had given me, except for one crucial detail. Rule 3: do not enter room after AM. My heart sank. I had broken a rule. Yuki forgot a goddamned rule. I glanced up from the paper, my hand shaking, and that's when I saw it there, on the far wall across from the nurse's station. A shadow stretched unnaturally long, too far from any light source to be my own. At first, it was subtle, a dark shape that shifted in the corner of my vision. But as I looked closer, my breath hitched, the shadow moved. But I hadn't moved Rule 5. If you see a shadow that doesn't belong to you, leave the room immediately. My chest tightened with terror. The shadow stood on the wall, warped and twisted, like someone standing just out of sight, pulling itself toward me. It didn't make sense. There was nothing there. Nothing that could cast a shadow like that. It loomed larger, darker, as if the very light was bending to accommodate it. And then the shadow shifted again, breaking from the wall and moving across the floor toward me, as though it had come alive. The air in the station thickened, suffocating me. I couldn't breathe. My legs felt frozen in place, my feet glued to the ground, as if the shadow was pulling at me. She was watching me from within the darkness. I could feel it. I stumbled back, tearing my gaze away. My heartbeat thundering in my ears as I fled the room, the shadows twisted unnaturally, creeping along the floor, their edges darkening and thickening from within the darkness. Ness, she began to form her twisted body, pulling itself free from the void, like she was born from the night itself, her torn smile stretching wider with every step. My legs carried me down the hallway, every muscle screaming as I reached the hospital's entrance. Entrance! I slammed my hands against the heavy doors, but they wouldn't budge. No matter how hard I pulled, no matter how desperately I tried to force them open, they remained sealed tight. My mind spiraled as the sound of footsteps echoed behind me, slow, heavy, and deliberate. I knew who they belonged to. She was coming. The slit-mouthed woman, the figure I had seen in Room. Even she was here, her presence of physical weight pressing down on me, her whispers growing louder, crawling into my ears, seeping into my mind. The words were unclear at first, but then they started forming into one clear message. You broke the rules. You can't leave. Frantic, my eyes darted around the small reception area, near the entrance there, on a metal cart pushed against the wall. I spotted it. A surgical tray tools scattered across its surface. Among them was a scalpel, sharp and gleaming in the dim light. My breath hitched as I remembered the final rule. If escape is your only option, be prepared to sacrifice a part of yourself. My hands closed around the scalpel, and I held it up the blade, catching the dim light of the room. I had no other choice. The footsteps were growing louder. Closing in, the thought of what she might do to me was enough to push me over the edge. With trembling hands, I brought the scalpel down toward my finger. My heart raced, my breath catching in my throat. Tears blurred my vision, and I bit down on my lip, bracing myself for what had to be done. The blade pressed against my skin, and with a deep, shuddering breath, I made the cut. The pain was immediate searing, and blinding blood pulled around the scalpel, dripping onto the cold floor. I wanted to scream, but I bit down harder on my lip, tasting blood. As I forced the cry back down, I had to finish with one last agonizing movement. My finger dropped to the floor with a sickening thud. The room spun, my body trembling from the shock of it. But I gasped, almost collapsing onto the floor beside it. But then the doors to the entrance burst open, and I felt the weight lift from the air. The hospital seemed to sigh, releasing me. Blood still poured from my hand, warm and sticky, as I stumbled on shaky legs toward the main street. Every step felt like a battle, my heart thundering in my chest, my breath shallow and ragged. The outside world lay just beyond a cold, indifferent freedom, waiting for me. But as I crossed the threshold, I didn't feel relief. Not at all. I turned back, my gaze lingering on the dark, cursed corridors of the hospital. I had escaped, yes, but I had left more than flesh behind. Something deeper. Something vital had been torn from me in that place. And I knew with a terrible certainty that it was something I would never get back. If this spine-chilling story kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit the like button and share it with someone who loves a good scare. Have you ever experienced something unexplainable, like the protagonist? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more terrifying tales that will make you question reality. Who knows?